There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn Breathes Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. And I have lots of exciting news personally this week, and not a whole bunch of reading to tell you about. The first thing to say is Mum and I, that's the most accurate way to put it, took possession of our new house. I will be living there with my husband Kenji when he gets here shortly, in about a month. And the possession date was yesterday. So that was a very exciting day and actually emotionally exhausting. I had been in the house twice before we bought it, and Mum, because she was in Hawaii when we bought it, had never set foot in it, and it was exciting. And the furnace duct cleaners arrived at the exact same time that we did, so it was just chaotic and fun. And my sister and my grandniece were there, and Mom's dog Charlie was there. It was just a family affair with the duct cleaners, one of whom was rather handsome young man, and there was just lots going on. It was overwhelming for yours truly. And right now the house cleaners are there cleaning the place from top to bottom. It was left quite dirty, and we had expected it would be. So we have a team of 3 young Ukrainian Canadians. I don't know that any of them have Canadian citizenship. They speak English to varying degrees, and were lovely. And I said, Slava Ukraina. I was so glad that they weren't Russian. Let's just leave it at that. Of course, there are Russian-speaking Ukrainians, like their fabulous, heroic president. But that was lovely. And I said, the only Ukrainian phrase I really know is Dai Borzha, which is their cheers. And they were quite impressed that I knew that. Anyway, so that's all very exciting. I don't really have much news about it. Other than that, I'm really excited. And tomorrow the carpet cleaners are coming in. The carpets in the basement, the previous owner, somebody who lived there up until yesterday, had been a painter, like an artist, and so there's a whole bunch of paint stains on the carpet in the basement, and they probably won't come out, but they'll come out enough that I won't care too much. Mum wants me to have 2 of the Persian or Turkish, whatever they were, carpets that my grandparents bought, I think when they were in Europe in the 70s, 60s. One for my living room, and then the one that's a little bit more worn that would cover that, all that paint. And now I have to decide, where's my office going to be? Because we've got 3 bedrooms upstairs, and then this huge finished basement, which definitely will house the majority of my library. But I think I might put my desk and my computer down there too. I'm toying with the idea. I should talk to my husband and see if he has an opinion from thousands of miles away. You can always move things around later, switch things up, but that's all very exciting, and it's making me tired, like a happy tired. So I've been postponing buddy reads and doing this and doing that, and haven't got a whole lot of reading done. That's all right. So that's my little update on that. And just the other day I launched a new product line of bookmarks that I have designed myself. There's a 3-minute video that I'll link to, and I won't talk for nearly 3 minutes now, but here they are. I love them so much. I'll just show them quickly, and then I'll put the GIF up. But they're on lovely heavy paper, like the other ones I've shown you in the past, with Shawn Breathes Books on the back. So here's what they look like. The first one, I just love the look on her face. Someone's obviously interrupting her. And so the caption reads, "Can't you see I'm busy?" And the second one, "I like big books, and I cannot lie." And the third one, another reader, very unhappy about being disturbed. "For crying out loud, what now?" I designed these to sell on my channel for people that would possibly be interested in buying 1 or 2 or 3 or more, as Patreon hasn't been growing really for the last year, and this is an affordable way that you can get something from me and give me a little bit of support. So I'm hoping that some of you will consider purchasing them. There is a link to the description as well in the show notes, both to the video and the little explanation page. Please check that out. At this point too, I want to give a huge shout out and express my profound gratitude towards an ongoing top tier patron of my Patreon since the very beginning, and supporter of this channel in innumerable other ways, Melanie, who mid and upper tier patrons get a set of all 3 of these new bookmarks for free because they've been supporting me already. And so when I told her hers were coming in the mail, she sent me another very generous donation, which is just helping unbelievably because, as all of you know, preparing to move and moving, all that stuff costs a lot. And Melanie, thank you so much. My goodness. The last thing before the mystery guest I want to say is March 31st. What is that? Monday? I think that's Monday, but March 31st is, Lindy told me this, International Trans Day of Visibility. I won't be observing it in any way other than to shout it out here and encourage you all to do something reading wise or otherwise to celebrate trans people and to express your support and love for trans folk, because being trans is one of the most vulnerable, dangerous, threatened identities, and always has been one of the very most, and it's now 10 times worse than it was a year ago. I'm happy to report that a Saskatoon trans activist, Blake Tate, appeared before Saskatoon City Council the other day, requesting that they declare Saskatoon a sanctuary city for gender diverse people like himself, and they did approve it, changed the wording from sanctuary city because that possibly had legal things that, like for immigration, that made some of the politicians a bit nervous, but they changed it from sanctuary city to a safe city. And Blake Tate, this trans activist, was quite fine with that wording change, and it's been declared by city council, and it's symbolic, but symbolism really matters when the reality is just becoming increasingly perilous. So I'm thrilled about that, and I wanted to shout that out here. Also, I'll have another comment when I get to the videos I put up this week, coming up in just a few minutes, about trans books, because there's a profusion of them coming out. Another fantastic mystery guest chat for you. And this week's mystery guest is the American writer Amy Stuber, joining us from Lawrence, Kansas, and the author of a collection of short stories that came out last fall with the wonderful title, Sad Grown-Ups. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me. As I mentioned in our pre-recording period, it's been a few months since my book came out, and so it's nice to have the attention going to the book again in this kind of lull period.
Absolutely happy to help with that in my small way. I find it difficult to interview a writer about a collection of short stories, but I'm going to ask you a big question and see what you do with it. Tell us about this collection.
Okay, that's always a challenging question for a collection, but I think some of the copy that, like the jacket copy or the publisher copy, was about like people who've been sad but tried not to be. And I think that's an umbrella for it. But there's a lot in here about gender, climate, mental health, escape is, I think, a big theme. Nonconformity, probably. People who are not necessarily conforming to societal expectations of what they should do and be, and then having sort of moments of crisis associated with that. That's my moment in time answer. It might be different in a week.
That's great. It's really not a fair question. Why don't we focus in on the title story, Sad Grown-Ups? So many of these stories, I haven't read them, but I have scanned the first lines of many of them, and there's a lot of zingers here. The opening line here is, childhood geniuses level out. They become sad grown-ups. Tell us more about that story and that intriguing opening.
It's a story about a couple of late teen boys who were in some kind of, quote, gifted and talented program, probably in elementary school, and people had a lot of high expectations of them, and they did a lot of kind of strange creative things, but then found post high school that they weren't maybe as special or interesting as they thought, or maybe their accomplishments didn't rise to the level of people's expectations for them, and they ended up hanging out in one of their mother's attics and not really accomplishing much. And then in the story, as the story goes along, you find out that they've planned to do a robbery, rob a bagel store where somebody, one of them, is interested in, romantically works, and it all, as you might expect, goes awry.
And it's kind of a little bit of a Robin Hood vibe, I think, from what I've read.
Yeah.
The reviews of that story. Yeah. Sometimes these questions end up being answered, well, it was my publisher's decision, but why is this the title for the collection?
I think really the collection is about how, like, your childhood expectations, childhood trauma, childhood hopes and dreams, all of that, how that comes to fruition in adulthood, and kind of the ways it works and the ways that it doesn't for people. That's a broad answer. It's a little bit tongue in cheek too. It's a little bit sarcastic, I guess, but just the concept of sad grown-ups is definitely representative of the collection, but it's also making fun of myself, I guess.
If these stories had been written just a little later in the era we currently, for the last, 10, 14 days find ourselves in, it might be sad, angry grown-ups.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that too. One of the recurring themes in the book is just the rage at being presented with a lot of options and choosing the wrong one societally, the things we could have done and didn't do, especially as it relates to climate. Yeah, sad and angry is probably apt. I could have called it that as well.
I want to keep focused on the openings of these stories. Here's another one. I haven't read this full story, obviously, but the opening to Doctor Visit just is incredible. You have the tiniest little baby cataracts, the ophthalmologist tells me, and he laughs because apparently cataracts, when small, are funny. So, do these openings, is that the first thing that comes to you, or tell me about the openings to short stories? How do they fit into the writing process?
I do usually get one line like that in my
Yeah.
head that kind of sometimes it's like a grain of autobiography. Like in the case of that one, that was an actual sentence my ophthalmologist said to me. And then I was like, oh, great. But I think usually a first line occurs to me. It doesn't always end up being the first line, but it's almost like a song, like it cycles around in my head for weeks or days or whatever. And then webs spring out from it and a story starts to take shape around the rhythm of a line or the idea of a line.
And I have read an essay that you wrote for Electric Literature, and you've probably commented on this elsewhere, that you've had quite a journey through what publishers expect and maybe a whole bunch of readers expect, which is the title of that essay was, I think, Where is Your Novel? Or Do You Have a Novel? And you've
Yeah.
been on quite a journey to get this short story collection together and to latch on to that genre or that form for your fiction, and more power to you. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I started writing in a real way, I guess, in the early 90s in college and grad school. And for many years, sent out collections, got close, but nothing happened. I had a lot of we really like this but letters. And then I worked with a couple of agents. I stepped away from writing after having kids for almost 10 years and then came back and worked with an agent who quit agenting. And that kind of was disappointing. Then I worked with another agent who was the do you have a novel person, which every agent really
All right.
that I've ever talked to has said. And I did write a novel and then I wrote another novel and I very much rushed them and didn't have success. The only one that got sent out to editors was the first, and it was like maybe, but no, it didn't end up landing with anyone. And it's an arduous process. And I ultimately came away from it cynical and more thinking, why don't we value the short story as a form? I know that sounds a little bit sour grapes because had I sold my novel, I'd be saying something very different. But I do love to read short stories and I hate that it's always like the afterthought for people. If someone gets a 2-book deal, it's never the collection that comes first. It's the kind of collection a year or two later and not as many people read it. And I think that's sad because a lot of our best writing is short stories.
I think it is in the essay in Electric Literature that I found this quote where you described trying to expand a short story into a novel, and you said it was like trying to make a bath mat work as a rug in a room the size of a ballroom.
That's it. That was the first novel I attempted to write. It was a short story called People's Parties that came out in Copper Nickel, and it is in this collection, Sad Grown-Ups. And I, in desperation, took that story and tried to make it a novel. And my sister still swears it's good, but I don't really think it's good. Writing a novel is such a different skill set and thought process. And the more I talk to people about it, the more I try it myself. I think for me, at least, it would require an outline and an idea that is novelistic and novel length from the outset.
By all accounts, all the reviews that I've seen, your bath mats are exquisite. So if you're a bath mat writer, more power to you, as I keep saying.
Well, thanks. Thanks.
Uh,
I do want to write a novel, but I think I need to give it more time and space.
Who are some of your favorite short story writers?
I always say these people, but I'll just say them again. I am a huge Joy Williams fan.
Oh,
Back in the 90s when I started writing stories, I was really into like Lori Moore. I love Dennis Johnson. So those people are really like formative, I guess, for me. And then more recently, I have worked for Split Lip magazine as an editor, first as a volunteer reader and then an editor since 2018. And I just getting to read the stories that people submit there. It's often new writers or new-ish writers who don't have books. It's really inspiring. There's just some incredible, beautiful writing coming through literary magazines. And I probably read lit mags more than complete books to look for short story inspiration.
the way you end some of these stories has been compared to Edward P. Jones, where there's alternate endings. And that, again, I'm just picking that up from what another interviewer said, and that immediately caught my attention because I'm a huge fan of Edward P. Jones.
Yeah.
Talk about alternate endings, or is ending a story the most difficult, the easiest? How does the ending part work for you?
First of all, I love Edward P. Jones. I remember reading what is it, Unknown City? Oh,
The
I'm thinking
novel's called The Known World, and
The
then
Known World, The Known World. Yeah, I
that's his novel, yeah.
love
And
that
then,
book. I think endings are my favorite thing to write, and
okay.
I love this is just tangential, but in music, I really love songs that are almost like epic, building up to some crescendoing up to some big moment. And I like to think of stories like that. I want to have like a big crashing ending of some kind. And I often will write the ending first and then go back and write up to the ending.
One of your interviewers lifted another sentence out of Doctor Visit, which intrigued me. The quote from your story is, "This is something I think about, mattering." And you had quite an interesting chat with that interviewer about, do short stories matter? Does writing matter? And I wondered if you could wax eloquent about that for a minute or two here.
I don't know if I can be super eloquent, but I will do my best. I do think I wish writing generally mattered more. I think in our current climate and with Trump as president, with just seeing what happened with the Kennedy Center, for example, among 10,000 other things, there's just this push toward mediocrity or toward thinking and reading and creating not mattering. And I think that's so upsetting. And I don't know what we're going to be left with, to be honest. I do think the thing that we can all do as readers and writers and creators is keep going and keep making things and putting those things out into the world. And so far, our mechanisms for doing that, like in terms of at least literary magazines, are like the place where we currently can continue to push the margins a little bit. But I am really worried about how big publishing will be affected by what's happening high level, this insistence that like the erasure of trans people. Like it's it's cruel and horrible and dangerous. And so I think long-winded response to your question about mattering, but I think those things matter as much as anything. And I think it's important for people who are creatives in any way to keep talking about it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to spring this question on you. It just occurred to me. Are you aware? Have you noticed how the Trumpian era began, what, 2016 or 2015 or something? Is it showing up in our fiction? Are there contours of all that nonsense and fascist nonsense that's being reflected in fiction that's been published since then? I'm not aware of it, and I wondered if you might be.
That's a good question. I feel like a few years ago, there was a real push for big publishing to be more representative of previously marginalized groups.
Yeah.
I don't know that I see that as much. I know that people of color in positions of power in publishing have lost those positions of power, at least some really high profile people in the last couple of years. And to me, like from an outside perspective, I don't feel the urgency around representation that maybe we saw 4 or 5 years ago. So I don't know. I don't have anything quantifiable. That's just my vibes response, but it seems like there is less urgency around that.
And Obama era novels are starting to be published that are set in the Obama years. I'm not aware of any novel that's set in the Trump years. And I'm also thinking about truth. It's a complicated, nuanced thing, how truth is expressed in fiction. And in this era, truth is just disappearing from civic life. And I just wonder how that's going to shape how fiction explores truth.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen this, but the NEA grants for organizations, there are all these new parameters that I think will result in people not applying. I already know people who were planning to apply for individual arts grants for fiction who just aren't going to, and I'm not going to. I don't want to be part of that cohort, and I think that's really sad. I think with a lot of prizes and organizations, for example, that haven't recognized what's going on in Palestine, people are pulling themselves out of things in a way that I respect, but I also worry that means we get fewer voices on the large stage. And so I think we've definitely seen that, if not by choices made by publishers and organizations, more by writers not wanting to associate with those places, understandably, but then the field is just increasingly narrow.
Yeah. Ay, ay, ay.
I know.
Ay,
Hard
ay.
time to be alive right now. It's just, and it's one thing I try to think about a lot is like, as a white cis person, I've had all this privilege, so I don't want to be now saying, "Oh my God, things are so hard," because I feel like it doesn't really give voice to the fact that things have been this hard for a lot of people forever,
Yeah,
and they've shouldered that forever. So the fact that more people are seeing that now or experiencing that now, it's not good, obviously, but it's not new to a lot of people.
absolutely. Absolutely. Within the Trump 2 era, what are you working on now, Amy?
Right now, sadly, nothing. I do have something that was in progress in the fall. That's a collection of related stories. I don't know if I'm going to go back to that. So I that was kind of about a family, one person who was experiencing a kind of mental health crisis, and about a family where the middle child, all three children are adults, and the middle child is experiencing schizophrenia and homelessness associated with mental health crisis, and kind of the ways in which the different members of the family respond to that. So I might go back to that, but I just have not had time and space to write in the last few months.
And I know that you're a big reader as well, and I'm, of course, not surprised. What have you been reading that you'd like to recommend?
I've recommended this already too much, but I loved it. I think my favorite book in 2024 was Blue Light Hours by Bruna, Dantas, Lobato. I just love that book. It's about a mother and daughter, their relationship as the daughter goes to the US for college. And as someone whose daughter went away to college in 2023, it really resonated with me. I felt like I was seeing into my daughter's life in a way through this narrator, and it's just beautifully written. And I love the way that it's really a quiet book. I just really appreciated these little moments that were accumulated throughout the book that maybe some people wouldn't deem novel worthy, but they're the moments that make up all of our days. So I just really like to read books like that. And yeah, Blue Light Hours by Bruna, Dantas, Lobato. And I'm
Great.
sorry if I mispronounced her name.
And I don't know anything about that writer. Do you know anything about that writer?
I don't know.
Yeah. The
She's
novel
really,
will stand for itself.
yeah, I know that she is incredibly kind. I've talked to her via social media. And she is a professor, like a new professor at Grinnell in Iowa. And that's all I know about her. And the book is about I'm just looking at the Goodreads blurb to give you
Yeah,
more
me
context,
too.
but young Brazilian woman's first year at college. But I thought when I read it that it was set maybe somewhere like Dartmouth, but I'm not sure of that.
That's a great recommendation. Do you have any others?
I just started reading this collection of, it claims to be stories inspired by Kafka or Kafkaesque
Oh,
stories. It's called, I had to write it down, A Cage Went in Search of a Bird, edited by Colleen Rothfeld, the book critic. And it starts with an Ali Smith story. I'm a huge Ali Smith fan. And so that's what I'm currently reading. And so far, so good. I really am enjoying it.
and it's an anthology, different writers.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's an anthology and it's got a lot of big names, and so I'm excited to read that. I'm keeping, because my brain has been so pulled by my job this year, I started keeping a list of books because otherwise I wouldn't remember. Oh, I know, I reread The Changeling by Joy Williams, and I also really loved The Anthropologists, and that's
What's that?
another author name that I will butcher if I try to say out loud.
Oh,
Ice.
it's Turkish writer, right?
Yeah,
Aysegül
Turkish.
Savas.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
don't know how it's pronounced either. And what I do in my videos, if I have no idea how to pronounce it, I'll look up a pronunciation and I'll just put that audio clip in so that at
Okay,
least the
thank
name
you.
gets pronounced correctly by the
Thank
author
you
or by
so much.
somebody.
Aysegül Savaş. Aysegül Savaş.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I love your reading tastes, and I have a very strong feeling that I'm going to absolutely love Sad Grown-Ups. So, what a wonderful chat, Amy. Thanks for being so generous with your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shawn. I've enjoyed it and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And I look forward to hearing what you think of Sad Grown-Ups.
It's been a delight. Thanks so much. Oh, Amy Stuber was just so incredibly stimulating to talk to. And this short story collection, Sad Grown-Ups, sounds amazing. Okay, so I have been extraordinarily productive in terms of video output, but they were all short videos and they had a time sensitivity to them, so I did put an extra burst of effort to get them out. My chat with the Saskatoon writer Meredith Hambrock on her debut novel called Other People's Secrets is up there, and it was a fabulous short chat, and I wanted to get it posted because in about 3 weeks, I think, 2 weeks, I'm going to be posting my interview with her about her second novel, She's a Lamb, which is coming out in early April. So you have that to look forward to. And then I put up a call for suggestions or comments on my groundbreaking decision. I'm going to be 60 next year. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to organize my library in my new house. And I wanted to tell you my ideas about it and get you to comment. And there's lots of great comments that have come in already, but please weigh in. And then very quickly, the merch alert video about the new bookmarks is also there. The fourth video, my most anticipated releases video for the spring. And some just incredible books coming up. I probably won't read any of them this year. Maybe I would have a space in my reading life to read one of them. But the ones that I've telling you about in the video sound amazing, and including 3 or 4 fabulous trans novels coming out at the end of April. In the spirit of International Trans Day of Visibility, you should all pre-order those. I'm gonna, as soon as I have the money together. So, I have been quite busy. I haven't, however, done a whole lot of reading. So I finished the novel I just mentioned, Meredith Hambrock's forthcoming She's a Lamb, and I interviewed her about it, and that interview will go up on its pub date, which I think is April 8th or something. So stay tuned for that. And so I'll just say, what will I say about She's a Lamb? I really enjoyed it. She warned me, if that's the right verb, that it was a darker tale than her debut, Other People's Secrets. And it was. And so it took quite a dark turn. And so that wasn't as much of a Shawn book as the first one, or even as the first half of it, but it's not like I soured on it. I just wasn't quite prepared for it to go the way it went. And people who like thrillery type books and books where you are inside the head of somebody who's got severely villainous psychological problems would enjoy it more than I did. But it was so well done that you're not going to hear a bad thing about it. I'm just describing my reaction in terms of what I like and don't necessarily like. But Meredith and I had a wonderful, really fun chat about it that will be coming to this channel very soon. And now I'm going to pull out all the stops to describe my reaction to the first 90 pages of this Irish novel, Gráinne, by Gráinne Murphy. I'm reading this to Mary Jean, and I really love it. It's the story of 3 childhood friends who are now around 40, and they have grown apart. There's been some estrangement, and the author, Gráinne, is keeping the reader really withholding what led to the estrangement. It seems like something happened that was more than just growing apart or moving away from the hometown or whatever. There was something more interpersonally problematic that kind of split them all apart, and in the most realistic, unsentimental way possible, she's bringing them back together. That's all I'm going to say about the plot. But I just love the writing, and there's humor, and a lot of pathos, and I just feel like I really know these characters deeply already, and so I am invested on what happens if and when they come back together. The tagline is, they say you can never make new old friends. And as somebody for whom friendship has been such a rewarding and confounding thing in my life, aspect of my life, and am now reconnecting with some really old university days friends, and that has been an interesting part of my experience now that I'm back in Saskatoon. It's just speaking to me so deeply. It's always a bit nervous when I interview an author and really like them before I've read their work. And I'm really both relieved and delighted with how much I'm loving Gráinne. I'm going to get started on one book in the coming days because it's going to be a buddy read with Joe Smith, and I think we're checking in. I forget if it's April 8th or April 10th. Oh, it is April 10th. I might have to renegotiate that date with Joe. I think we set that date before I realized I was moving. But anyway, around that time, we're going to check in only once on this queer Bengali novel called Unlove Story by Sudipto Pal, translated by one of my favorite translators, Arunava Sinha, who was my mystery guest last year. I'll put a link to that chat. And this is out from Seagull Press, who make the most physically beautiful books. The author is a writer, statistician, and data scientist. That's quite a combo. Regularly writes on LGBTQ+ subjects. The protagonist is the shy and introspective 16-year-old who finds himself drawn to the older cousin of one of his classmates, and plot ensues. Looking forward to seeing what that's all about, and that is my Friday Reads. Thank you so much for watching.